What happens when two of America's most beloved personalities collide on live television in a way nobody saw coming? The studio lights were bright, the cameras were rolling, and what started as a routine morning interview quickly spiraled into one of the most uncomfortable moments in daytime television history. Before we get into exactly what went down between Michael J. Fox and Michael Strahan, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling us what you think about celebrity interviews going off the rails. Now, let's dive into what really happened on that Good Morning America set. The morning started like any other on Good Morning America. Michael Strahan sat behind the desk with his signature smile, ready to welcome his guest for what the producers had built as an inspiring conversation. Michael J. Fox was scheduled to discuss his latest advocacy work, his ongoing battle with Parkinson's disease, and some reflections on his legendary career. The audience was primed for the kind of uplifting segment that morning television thrives on, the kind where everyone leaves feeling a little bit better about the world. Strahan opened with his usual charm, his voice warm and welcoming as he introduced Fox to thunderous applause from the studio audience. Fox walked out waving to the crowd and took his seat across from Strahan. The two Michaels exchanged pleasantries, and for the first few minutes, everything seemed perfectly normal. They talked about Fox's foundation, the progress being made in Parkinson's research, and the importance of maintaining hope in the face of adversity. Strahan nodded along, asking thoughtful questions, and Fox responded with his characteristic wit and optimism. But then Strahan shifted gears. He leaned forward slightly, his expression becoming more serious, and said, Michael, I have to ask you something that I think a lot of people have been wondering about. You've been so open about your condition, so transparent with the public. But there are some who say that celebrities using their platform for health advocacy sometimes oversimplifies complex medical issues. What do you say to critics who suggest that your visibility might give people false hope about finding a cure? The question hung in the air for a moment. Fox's smile didn't exactly disappear, but it changed. Something flickered across his face, a flash of something that wasn't quite anger, but wasn't far from it either. He tilted his head slightly and replied, "Well, Michael, I'd say that's an interesting way to frame a question about people trying to make the world a better place. False hope. I've lived with this disease for over 3 decades. I think I have a pretty good understanding of what's realistic and what's not. What I do know is that research requires funding, and funding requires awareness, and awareness requires people like me who are willing to stand up and talk about it. So, if that's oversimplifying things, then I guess I'm guilty as charged." Strahan shifted in his seat, clearly not expecting that tone. He held up a hand, his smile still in place but looking a bit more forced now. Hey, I'm not attacking you, Michael. I'm just playing devil's advocate here. It's what journalists do. We ask the tough questions." Fox nodded slowly, but his eyes had hardened just a fraction. "Right. Tough questions. That's fair. But here's the thing, Michael, and I mean this with all due respect. There's a difference between tough questions and cynical questions. Asking whether I'm giving people false hope, that's not journalism. That's skepticism wrapped up in a question mark. You want to play devil's advocate? Fine. But the devil doesn't need any more advocates. He's doing just fine on his own." The studio audience went quiet. You could feel the temperature in the room drop. Strahan's co-hosts sitting off to the side exchanged quick glances. This wasn't how these interviews were supposed to go. This wasn't the script. Strahan cleared his throat and tried to recover. "Look, I think we're getting off on the wrong foot here. All I'm trying to do is have an honest conversation. You've been in the public eye for a long time. You know how this works. People ask questions, sometimes uncomfortable ones, and that's how we get to deeper truths." Fox leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. Deeper truths. Okay, let's talk about deeper truths then. You want to know what's really uncomfortable, Michael? It's sitting here on national television being asked to defend the work that I've dedicated the last 3 decades of my life to. It's being questioned about whether I'm helping people or hurting them by sharing my story. That's what's uncomfortable. Not your questions, but the assumption behind them. Strahan's jaw tightened. "With all due respect, Michael, you're being a little defensive here. I asked you one question, and you're acting like I just accused you of fraud. I'm trying to have a conversation with you, man to man, and you're coming at me like I'm the enemy." Fox laughed, but it wasn't a warm laugh. It was sharp, almost bitter. "Defensive? You think I'm being defensive? Let me tell you something about defense, Michael. When you live with a chronic illness, you spend every single day defending yourself, defending your choices, defending your optimism, defending your right to exist without being pitted or questioned or doubted. So yeah, maybe I am a little defensive. Maybe I've earned that right. The tension was palpable now. Strahan glanced toward the camera, then back at Fox. He was clearly trying to figure out how to steer the ship back on course, but Fox wasn't giving him much room to maneuver. Strahan tried again, his voice a bit firmer now. I hear what you're saying. I really do. But you've got to understand that when you put yourself out there the way you have, people are going to ask questions. That's just the reality of it. You can't expect everyone to just nod along and agree with everything you say. Fox leaned forward now, his voice calm but cutting. I don't expect everyone to agree with me, Michael. What I expect is a basic level of respect. And what I don't expect is to come on a show like this, a show that invited me to talk about my work, only to be ambushed with questions that frame that work as potentially harmful. You want to ask me tough questions? Ask me about the science. Ask me about the challenges. Ask me about the setbacks. But don't sit there and imply that what I'm doing is giving people false hope. That's not journalism. That's just cynicism dressed up as curiosity. Strahan's smile was completely gone now. He set down his notes and looked directly at Fox. You know what, Michael? I think you're overreacting. I asked you a legitimate question, and instead of answering it like a professional, you've turned this into a personal attack. I respect everything you've done, I really do. But right now you're acting like I'm your enemy, and I'm not. Fox stared at him for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was quieter but no less intense. You know what the difference is between you and me, Michael? I've spent 30 years of my life fighting for something bigger than myself. What have you spent your time fighting for? The silence that followed Fox's question was deafening. Strahan's expression shifted from surprise to genuinely offended. He sat up straighter in his chair, his professional composure cracking for the first time. Excuse me? What have I been fighting for? Is that really what you just asked me? Fox didn't back down. His gaze remained steady, unwavering. I asked you a question, Michael. You seem pretty comfortable asking me tough questions, so I figured turnabout is fair play. What have you dedicated your life to besides your career? Strahan's voice rose slightly, the frustration clear now. You don't know anything about my life, about what I do, about the causes I support, or the people I help. You come on here with this attitude like you're the only person who's ever faced adversity, the only person who's ever fought for something meaningful. And you know what? That's arrogant. That's incredibly arrogant. Fox shook his head slowly. I never said I was the only person facing adversity. But what I will say is that I didn't come here to have my life's work questioned by someone who seems more interested in creating a moment than having a real conversation. You want to talk about arrogance? Let's talk about the arrogance of sitting in that chair with all your health and all your privilege and asking me if I'm giving people false hope. Do you have any idea how insulting that is? Strahan pointed at Fox, his voice sharp. Don't you dare talk to me about privilege. You don't know what I've been through. You don't know what I've overcome to get where I am. And you certainly don't get to sit there and judge me because I asked you a question you didn't like. This is my show, Michael. I invite people here to have real conversations, not to be coddled and told how wonderful they are. Fox's eyebrows raised. Your show. Is that what this is about? Control? You asked me here, I accepted the invitation, and now you're upset because I'm not playing along with whatever narrative you had planned. I've been doing interviews for 40 years, Michael. I know when someone is trying to create drama for ratings, and that's exactly what you were doing with that question. Strahan leaned forward, his hands gripping the edge of the desk. Drama for ratings? Are you serious right now? I have been nothing but respectful to you since you walked out here. I asked you one question that plenty of people have wondered about, and you've spent the last 10 minutes attacking me personally. If anyone is creating drama here, it's you. Fox's laugh was cold. Respectful. You call that respectful? Let me tell you what respect looks like, Michael. Respect is doing your homework before someone comes on your show. Respect is understanding the work they've done and the battles they've fought before you start questioning their motives. Respect is not using someone's chronic illness as a jumping-off point for a controversial segment. That's not respect. That's exploitation. The word hung in the air like a grenade. Strahan's face flushed red, his composure completely gone now. Exploitation? Did you just accuse me of exploiting you on live television? You've got a lot of nerve, you know that? I have interviewed hundreds of people on this show. People with stories far more difficult than yours. And not once, not one single time, has anyone ever accused me of exploitation. Fox stood up suddenly, and the movement caught everyone off guard. The camera operators adjusted their frames quickly, and you could hear someone in the control room frantically giving directions through the headsets. Fox looked down at Strahan, his voice cutting through the tension. Maybe that's because those people were too polite to call it what it is. Maybe they just smiled and nodded and played along because that's what you're supposed to do on morning television. But I'm done playing along, Michael. I'm done pretending that what you do here is journalism when it's really just entertainment dressed up as news. Strahan stood up as well, meeting Fox's gaze directly. The two men were now standing, facing each other across the desk, and the energy in the studio had shifted completely. This was no longer an interview. This was a confrontation. You want to talk about journalism? Fine. Let's talk about it. Journalism is asking difficult questions, even when they make people uncomfortable. Journalism is not letting people come on television and say whatever they want without any pushback. That's called a press release, not an interview. I asked you a legitimate question about the perception of your advocacy, and you turned it into a personal attack because you couldn't handle being challenged. Fox's voice was like ice. I've been challenged my entire life, Michael. Every single day is a challenge. What I can't handle is being disrespected by someone who has no idea what it's like to live in my shoes. You want to challenge me? Challenge my ideas. Challenge my methods. Challenge the science. But don't you dare challenge my integrity or suggest that I'm somehow misleading people who are suffering. That crosses a line, and you know it. Strahan threw his hands up. I never questioned your integrity. I asked if celebrities in general might sometimes oversimplify medical issues. You're the one who made it personal. Fox stepped closer to the desk, his voice rising for the first time. Because it is personal. It's my life. It's my body. It's my fight. You can't separate those things and pretend like you're just asking abstract questions. When you ask me if I'm giving people false hope, you're asking me if my life's work has been a lie. How is that not personal? Strahan's co-hosts were now standing as well, clearly unsure whether they should intervene. One of them tried to step forward, saying something about taking a commercial break, but Strahan waved them off. No, we're going to finish this conversation right here, right now. Michael, I'm sorry if you feel disrespected, I truly am. But you need to understand that when you're a public figure, when you're an advocate, people are going to question your message. That's not an attack. That's accountability. Fox shook his head, his voice filled with frustration. Accountability. You want to talk about accountability? Then be accountable for your words, Michael. Be accountable for the impact they have. You sit here in your comfortable chair, on your comfortable set, with your comfortable life, and you throw out questions like grenades without thinking about who they might hurt. That's not accountability. That's recklessness. Strahan's voice was almost a shout now. My comfortable life? You don't know anything about my life. You don't know what I've sacrificed, what I've overcome, what I deal with every single day. You think because you have Parkinson's disease that somehow gives you a monopoly on suffering? That gives you the right to talk down to me like I'm some kind of privileged fool who doesn't understand struggle. Fox pointed at Strahan, his hand trembling slightly, though whether from emotion or his condition was impossible to tell. I never said I had a monopoly on suffering. What I said was that you asked me an insulting question. And instead of acknowledging that, you've spent the last 15 minutes trying to justify it. That's the problem, Michael. You're so focused on being right that you can't even consider the possibility that you might have been wrong. Strahan slammed his hand on the desk, the sound echoing through the studio. I wasn't wrong, and you know what? I'm done apologizing for doing my job. If you can't handle tough questions, then maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews. Maybe you should just stick to your foundation and leave the media appearances to people who can handle a little scrutiny. The audience gasped. That line had crossed from heated debate into something uglier. Fox stared at Strahan for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was dangerously quiet. You want me to leave? Is that what you're saying? You want me off your show? Strahan's chest was heaving, his face still flushed with anger. What I want is for you to stop acting like a victim and start acting like an adult who can handle criticism. Fox reached up and removed his microphone, the small clip making a sharp sound as it came free from his shirt. Fine. I'm done here. The sound of the microphone hitting the desk echoed through the studio like a gunshot. Fox turned away from Strahan, ready to walk off the set, but Strahan wasn't finished. Wait, you're just going to walk out? That's your response? You're going to storm off like a child who didn't get his way. Fox stopped mid-step and turned back around, his eyes blazing. A child? You're calling me a child? I'm walking away from a conversation that stopped being productive about 10 minutes ago. That's called knowing when to disengage, Michael. Maybe you should try it sometime instead of digging yourself deeper into a hole. Strahan came around from behind the desk now, closing the distance between them. The camera crew scrambled to adjust their positions, clearly unsure of what to do. This was live television, and there was no script for this. No, you know what? You don't get to walk out of here and play the victim on social media later, talking about how you were mistreated on my show. If you've got something to say it now, to my face on camera. Fox turned fully to face him, standing his ground despite the tremor in his hands. You want me to say it on camera? Fine. You brought me here under false pretenses. Your producers told me this would be a conversation about the progress we're making in Parkinson's research, about hope and resilience. Instead, you ambushed me with a question designed to undermine everything I've worked for. That's not journalism, Michael. That's a setup. And I'm not going to stand here and let you turn my life into a sound bite for your highlight reel. Strahan's voice was incredulous now, his hands gesturing wildly. A setup? Are you hearing yourself right now? I asked you one question, one single question, and you've turned this entire interview into a circus. You're the one who made this personal. You're the one who started attacking me. I was trying to have an intelligent conversation about complex issues, and you decided to make it about your ego. Fox's laugh was bitter and sharp. My ego? That's rich coming from you, Michael. You've built an entire career on your personality, on being the friendly face of morning television. And the second someone challenges you, the second someone doesn't bow down and thank you for the opportunity to be on your show, you can't handle it. You talk about accountability, but you can't even be accountable for a bad question. Strahan stepped even closer, his voice dropping to something more intense, more personal. You want to know the truth? The truth is, you came on this show with a chip on your shoulder. I could see it the moment you sat down. You were looking for a fight. And congratulations, you found one. But don't stand there and pretend like I'm the villain in this story when you've been combative from the jump. Fox's jaw clenched. I came here to talk about something that matters, something bigger than both of us. But you couldn't help yourself, could you? You had to go for the controversy. Had to try to create a viral moment. Well, you got your moment, Michael. I hope it was worth it. I hope when you go to bed tonight, you feel good about how you treated someone who was just trying to make a difference in the world. Strahan's eyes narrowed. Don't you dare try to guilt-trip me. I have nothing to feel bad about. I did my job. I asked a question that needed to be asked, and you couldn't handle it. That's on you, not me. And for the record, I've donated to Parkinson's research. I've supported the cause. So don't stand there and act like I'm some heartless monster who doesn't care. Fox tilted his head, his expression a mixture of anger and disappointment. You donated to Parkinson's research. Good for you, Michael. You want a medal? You want me to thank you for your generosity? Donating money doesn't give you the right to question the motives of people who are living with this disease every single day. It doesn't give you permission to suggest that we're somehow misleading people. Money is easy, Michael. Showing up is easy. What's hard is having respect and empathy for people's lived experiences. Strahan threw his hands up in frustration. I have empathy. I have plenty of empathy. But empathy doesn't mean I have to agree with everything you say or never challenge your perspective. That's not how conversations work. That's not how growth happens. You want everyone to just nod along and tell you you're wonderful. But that's not reality. Fox's voice was still. I don't want everyone to tell me I'm wonderful. What I want is to be treated with basic human decency. What I want is to come on a show and talk about the work that I love without being questioned about whether that work is harmful. Is that really too much to ask? Is basic respect really such an unreasonable expectation? Strahan was shaking his head before Fox even finished. You keep saying I disrespected you, but I didn't. I asked you a question. A question. People ask questions, Michael. That's how interviews work. If you can't distinguish between a challenging question and disrespect, then maybe the problem isn't with my question. Maybe the problem is with your perception. One of the producers was now on the set floor trying to get someone's attention, frantically gesturing toward the control room. But both men were too locked in their confrontation to notice. Fox's voice rose again. My perception? My perception is that you invited me here, you asked me a loaded question, and when I called you out on it, you doubled down instead of acknowledging that maybe, just maybe, you could have phrased it better. That's what I perceive, Michael. I perceive someone who is more interested in protecting his ego than in having an honest conversation. Strahan's face was flushed red now, his professional veneer completely shattered. Protecting my ego? That's what you think this is about? Let me tell you what this is really about. You came on my show. You disrespected me in front of my audience. You questioned my integrity. You attacked my character. And now you're trying to make yourself the victim. That's what's really happening here. And I'm not going to let you rewrite this narrative. Fox took a step back, his expression hardening into something final. You know what, Michael? You're right about one thing. I am done here. I'm done with this conversation. I'm done with this show, and I'm done with you. You want to sit here and justify your behavior? Go ahead. But I'm not going to waste another second of my life arguing with someone who clearly doesn't get it. Strahan's voice followed him as he turned away. That's right. Walk away. That's what people do when they can't defend their position. They run. Fox stopped one more time, looking back over his shoulder. I don't need to defend my position, Michael. 30 years of work speaks for itself. What speaks for you is how you treated a guest on your show, and everyone watching can make up their own mind about what that says about you as a person. Strahan shouted after him as Fox headed toward the exit. This is live television, Michael. You can't just walk off. Get back here. But Fox kept walking, his stride determined despite the visible tremor in his movement. One of the stage managers moved to intercept him, but Fox waved him off. The cameras followed his exit, capturing every step as he disappeared through the studio doors. Strahan stood there, his chest heaving, his face a mixture of anger and disbelief. He looked at the cameras, then at his co-hosts, who stood frozen in shock, then back at the doors Fox had just walked through. The audience sat in stunned silence, unsure whether to applaud or gasp or simply sit in the uncomfortable reality of what they had just witnessed. Strahan finally turned to the main camera, his jaw tight. We're going to take a break. When we come back, he paused, seeming to search for words that wouldn't come. We're going to take a break. The studio lights dimmed slightly as someone finally made the call to cut to commercial. But the damage was done. What was supposed to be an inspiring conversation about perseverance and hope had devolved into one of the most explosive confrontations in morning television history. Two men, both named Michael, both beloved by millions, had just destroyed any goodwill between them in a matter of minutes. And it had all happened live, with millions watching, unable to look away from the collision of egos, principles, and deeply held beliefs about respect, journalism, and what it means to have a platform. The question wasn't whether this would become the most talked about moment of the year. That was already guaranteed. The question was what it meant, who was right, and whether either of them would ever be able to come back from what had just happened. So, what do you think? Was Strahan out of line with his question, or was Fox overreacting to a fair point? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and make sure you hit that subscribe button. Because trust me, we're going to be breaking down the fallout from this interview for a long time. What other celebrity interview moments do you think went too far?